So it seems as if they've added more street light poles, which makes the road seem much more closer to completion. Now, a lot of these light poles are going to carry solar lights, LED lights, which means that although they require electricity, a lot of the electricity, especially in the daytime, will be gathered from the sun. And I guess in the nighttime, some of that electricity will be used to power the LED lights. And I guess in the case of shortfall, they'll probably use electricity generated by other means. So this is what has happened since we've been here the last time. It seems as if they've actually built out this median, created some kind of trench here. I'm actually walking, standing in the middle of it at this point. There's like a canal running along the median, the center divide between these two roads, and they've actually built a guardrail. I'm crossing over onto the other side again because it seems to be more traffic on that side. But this is what is happening here. Ahead, that is the new maternity hospital. That's the maternity hospital here at Ogle, a new hospital being built by the government. And looking straight ahead, now we're on the western side of this road, which will eventually be the northbound lanes. And now, of course, there are 2 lanes. So I guess eventually this is going to be a 4-lane highway. We're at Ogle, we're going past the airport. So we're about almost 2 miles from the East Coast Road, right, where we started. We started about 2 miles north of this location. That's looking north. And this is looking south. Ogle Airport is over to the west behind these trees. That is the runway and all that stuff. And these buildings were left over from Gaisuko. These used to be the manager's buildings here at Gaisuko's Ogle Estates. So this is what the road looks like, the East Coast Bypass Road. They seem to have built a shoulder, which isn't paved, but it's well defined. The shoulder of the road, I guess, will eventually become the bicycle lane and the emergency lane and so on. But they seem to have had a fairly consistent plan, which is different from what I observed when they were building the Heroes Highway, which was more like make it up as you go along. So far, I've seen turning lanes, or at least what could become turning lanes, at each of the intersections along the highway, along this road so far, which is what is still missing from Heroes Highway. That's the maternity hospital. There's still a crane on the roof, which means they seem to be still working on some aspects of the roof. But otherwise, it seems to be more or less completed. On the other side, there are a couple of guys riding horses, I guess taking advantage of the open space. This sand track. It'd be interesting to see them put in a race course. These guys are riding horses on the sand track. Just having fun on a Saturday morning on their horses. I guess they're riding in a circle on the sand. But so there ahead of us, that is the headquarters, the new headquarters of ExxonMobil here at Ogle. That's their Exxon's headquarters at Ogle. They seem to be slowly coming to completion, being able to complete that building. Probably going to move in soon. It's conveniently located here at the airport because they need to be able to fly in and fly out, I guess, to the platforms that they operate on the Atlantic Ocean, as well as get access to Houston. 5-hour flight from this airport will land you in Houston, the American headquarters of ExxonMobil. But they seem to be building a massive headquarters here, which means that this might be their central point for operating in South America, their headquarters in South America. Now going past the airport, the hospital, that is the maternity hospital. As you can see, still a lot of work to be completed. On the ground floor, you can see still open. I guess they're going to be working on the inside of the building, but a lot of work to be completed, as you can see from this distance. The ground floor is still open. But this is what it looks like, guys. This is what this new highway looks like. It seems as if they have managed to complete the road markings up to this point, and the road surface, which is quite smooth. I guess there's going to be an exit for ExxonMobil at this point, because they are building, Exxon is building its road. That's the entrance to Exxon. They're building their road here, and it's probably going to cross or turn on to join this East Coast Bypass Road. So the last time I was this far on the East Coast Bypass Road was several months ago, probably 6 months, 8 months, a year ago. Time flies, but I did make a walkthrough from the Eccles end on that day. For me, the round trip was about 17 miles. I think I'm about 8 miles into my morning walk today. So at this point, I'm 8 miles from home, and I have another 8 or so miles to go to get back to the point where I started. But this is where we are. Like I said, this is the official entrance to ExxonMobil. This is their road, and eventually these guys on their horses, eventually Exxon will have their exit or entrance to their compound at this point. All right, Exxon will probably have their entrance as well as an exit for the hospital. Those have to be built. But what it seems they've done here is they've completed guardrails. They've added guardrails, at least on the south side of the west side of the highway. That's a helicopter coming in. Where is it? There it is. Crossing over That's a helicopter crossing over the highway. But yes, guys, this seems to be to me a very good road. It does not seem to have the uneven surface of the concussion road, and they seem to be putting in fairly good safety barriers. For example, this barrier again is necessary because you're crossing over water. Right, there's a culvert here, and if you run off the road, you could end up drowning in what will eventually become a canal in the center divide once they complete that. So putting in these safety features, part of making them part of the design, is what is international standard. So when I say a lot of what is being built, infrastructure that is being built in Ghana does not meet international standards, what I'm referring to is some of this design safety. In other words, before you even construct the road, you start constructing the road, there are certain safety features that are part of the international standard international building code for roads that have to be designed into the road, and that is what was missing from Heroes Highway, particularly, for example, the turning lanes that are missing at every intersection. But of course, I know that Heroes Highway was not initially designed to be the way it is right now. It was a design that was modified after the new government took over from the old government, coalition government, and changed those plans to what is existing now. But when you build a road, it is supposed to be designed with safety in mind. Morning. And part of that safety is building those guardrails at points where you have to anticipate that drivers could run off the road and end up in life-threatening situation, such as on the water. So you put in the guardrails to guard against it. Of course, a lot of those international standards are now being redesigned to meet the requirements for electric vehicles, because electric vehicles have a much lower center of mass, right? Because the batteries are usually stored in the floor, and a lot of that weight, which is now more in general, more than the average weight of a typical car, results in those vehicles having more momentum, and they would just go right through the guardrails that are currently being built. In other words, they have to reassess the standards of these safety features for electric vehicles, because vehicles are changing. That's looking back where we come from. We've gone past the maternity hospital, right? This is the south facing side of the maternity hospital. That's what it looks like from the south. And we're now about 2.5, maybe approaching 3 miles into the 7-mile walk along the East Coast Bypass Road. These guys are still working on the road lines. Morning. They're putting in, those are the street lights. Morning. Putting in the lamp posts and road markings. So these guys are working on the road up to this point. You see the road markings have been completed, but they stop at that point, which means that the remainder of this road has to be marked out. But this is way more road, that is, completion is at a much higher stage. I would say at this point more than 60% completed, maybe 75% completed, the 25% remaining having to do with putting in the safety barriers, like the guardrails and the road markings and so on. So this is what it looks like 3 miles into, well, 2.5 to 3 miles away from East Coast Bypass Road. The road actually turns west. So you can see the long line of street light poles. They go up to a point and then they disappear. They disappear because that's the point at which the road turns turns west. So it's about a mile or so ahead. The road turns west. And the last time I was at that intersection, they hadn't completed that turning point. It seems as if that could become a kind of underpass situation where the road could continue south deep into the Demerara region, probably heading all the way to Linden,